Project Medtech.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lindsay Deneen, Director of Marketing and Engagement at Project Medtech, and welcome to another episode of the Project Medtech podcast. If we can help you in any way, or you would like to suggest a future guest, you can email us at info@projectmedtech.com. If conversations like this are helpful, that's exactly why we bring people together at our signature events, the Midwest Showcase, the Startup Symposium, and Coming to America. For more on our events that include networking, education, and pitch competitions for startups, check them out at www.projectmedtech.com. We even have sponsorship options if your company is also dedicated to accelerating medical technology to impact patient lives. So reach out today to get involved. The Project Medtech podcast is proudly sponsored by Ward Law. Ward Law Office LLC is a boutique law firm specializing in the practice of patent and trademark law. They are committed to providing inventors, entrepreneurs, and businesses of all types with personal and professional services and are flexible to meet your unique needs. It is their goal to both educate on how to secure valuable patent and trademark protection and to provide high-quality services at rates affordable to independent inventors, startups, and small businesses alike.
Today's episode of Project Medtech is brought to you by Wheelhouse DMG, performance marketing for privacy-first industries like medtech and healthcare. Every Wheelhouse client experienced record growth in 2025. That's the result of more than a decade building the data infrastructure, measurement systems, and domain expertise that healthcare and medical device marketing actually requires. Find out how every Wheelhouse client experienced record growth in 2025 at wheelhousedmg.com.
Without further ado, let's dive in.
Okay, Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Dwayne, it's good to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you as well. I know we were talking, when we just hopped on here, I had thought I had done a podcast before. I know we had met previously. We've had your dad on one of our other podcast series, I think at one point in time. Although, to be honest, I was blanking on what company he was with at the time. It might have been Olympus, because I know he went to Zimmer at some point. Regardless, finally, 270 some episodes in, I finally had in the podcast. I'm familiar with your platform, but let's maybe just give the listeners an introduction into who you are, your background, and what you're doing at AcuityMD.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne. Big fan of the great work you're doing as well, and 260 or so podcasts in. That's super, super exciting. So I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Mike Monovoukas. I'm the co-founder and CEO of AcuityMD. We started the company back right around the start of COVID. With my background, my first startup was a medical device that we were trying to go through FDA and do a clinical study on and raise capital for, and that startup failed. And the biggest lesson I took away from that experience was how valuable it was to when you pitch a product, especially to, a prospect, whether it be for a study or even a commercial prospect, it's easy to fall back into the trap of pitching features and benefits. It's much harder, to build that empathy with the end user, what they care about, what outcomes they're experiencing, what they're publishing on, all of the stuff that's unique in the healthcare environment, and really tailor your product around what they're experiencing in this dynamic healthcare environment. And so, what I took away from that experience, that failed startup, was the power of data, and really to put it in the hands of frontline folks innovating and commercializing medical technologies so that they could build closer relationships and build more empathy with their end users. That leads to better products, that leads to better sales cycles, that leads to more technology in the hands of the right providers so that they can treat patients better. So that was my first startup. Fast forward to starting AcuityMD, really wanted to build a platform that harnessed data about the US healthcare space to start, but also could connect to existing customer data that each of these companies have and really empower their front line with insights, about their prospects, about their customers, so that they can engage at a much deeper level and build empathy at a much deeper level. So that's how we started with AcuityMD. We're, about 6 years in now, and, a lot has happened in these 6 years. We had COVID. We've got this wave of consolidation, in the provider space. We've had, access getting shrunk and more challenging for medtech, field reps. We've had, obviously AI and the big, sort of explosion in capabilities now with the LLMs. So a lot of really exciting stuff over the years. Our company at this point, we work with over 500 medtech companies, 16 of the top 20, by revenue. And we just recently raised our Series C. So closed an $80 million Series C, and are well capitalized and really investing in the AI platform to bring the medtech industry into this new age with LLMs and data.
Wow. Congratulations on the fundraise. That's super exciting. And you just love to see the progression of things. I'll circle back on the fundraising front because I'll have some questions there. Let's keep going on what Acuity MD is. And maybe talk about it from an initial perspective, and then how you've grown it over the years, how people are interfacing with it, that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So even from the beginning, we had this kind of thesis that there's all sorts of messy and fragmented market data that describes the healthcare landscape, describes hospitals and what procedures they do, what outcomes they do, who owns the hospital, who practices at the hospital, data that it describes the individual physicians, their practicing, their clinical practice, their referral networks, their procedural volumes. There's all this kind of data out there in the ether about the healthcare space, medical device relevant information as well. And companies struggled harnessing external data to drive kind of commercial strategies and insights, but they also struggle with their internal data as well. And you can think of these companies. I mean, you've been in the industry. Like, some of these businesses have tens of thousands, if not millions, of SKUs, right? They have such a variety of different products that they go to market with, the complexity underneath all of that. And, and then you layer on where they're contracted and where they're not. You layer on all the different business units they sell through. You layer on each of these products has different indications for use and can be used in different clinical settings. And so the complexity of just the internal data that these companies have is a Goliath. And so, where we started the company around, how do we integrate both market data as well as first party customer data into an ontology that could describe how medical device companies go to market, so that insights would be immediately available, so that sales leaders could guide their teams towards quota, so that sales reps had the resources they need to hit quota and build those close customer relationships that I described earlier. And so marketing teams could figure out how to size and segment the market and where to expand into new market areas. All of that is premised under kind of a well-modeled data set that combines both third-party data, external data, with first-party internal data, so you truly see a 360 view of the market and of the customer. And so that's always been, even in the original pitch deck, original customer pitch deck that we put together, was always around, hey, you have all this messy internal data, there's all this messy external data. How do you combine it into a universe that makes sense for your go-to-market process and how you build and sell products?
Makes total sense. Of what you've done there. And commercialization is without a doubt the hardest thing a med tech company has to do. I've always said that, like, even going through regulatory when you're going through it seems like a daunting task. But at the end of the day, the FDA's mission is just to keep people, it's just to make sure you're putting forward a safe and effective product. They're not there to deter you from going to market. Commercialization's hard because you can do everything right and the timing's just not right. Or, that specific hospital just has other things going on. They're not ready to evaluate your thing, and you can easily wasting time there. So it's a hard thing. The more tools we have to help companies do that appropriately, I think is really awesome. When you mentioned your client base, it very much sounds like people are engaging through your platform at all levels, right? The big behemoths, the early stage companies. As you're building this product, but as you're revolutionizing what AcuityMD is going to look like in the future, How do you take into account the needs of these companies that are at different stages of commercialization?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we've always been a mission-driven company since the start, and our mission is to accelerate adoption of medical technology. And that's the guiding light that, drives what we do and, how we build our roadmap on the product side, the types of customers that we like supporting. And so all of these companies, big and small, share that mission as well. They have their own, innovative technologies they want to bring out to the market, as effectively as possible. And so, obviously the needs of a 5-person scrappy startup that just got, is just starting to get, commercial versus a multinational 10 business unit strategic are very different. Right, the data that they have access to is very different. Right, one has been in market for dozens, if not 100 years, and has relationships and channel partnerships, and has deep customer footprints that they can leverage and have data that has been generated on, whereas the other is first to market. And so and building all that from scratch, I think the overarching um, goal is, how do we make it easier to bring new products out to market, and how do we make it less risky, so that when you're going through the FDA, whether you're established player or an innovator, how do you de-risk some of those decisions that you make early on with the commercial understanding baked much earlier on in the product development cycle, so that when you do get to be commercialized, you do get that approval. A lot of those decisions have already been kind of thought through and made, so that you understand your channel, you understand your ideal customer profile, you know where to place reps, you know which accounts to prioritize first, you know which KOLs to engage first. If you can bring all those decisions up in the process, it really de-risks that launch, and that's consistent for a larger company as well as a high growth innovator. So, the needs are obviously different. Larger companies have more data, they have more complex permissions, they've got existing processes that they're using to prospect and call plan and manage the sales force, whereas newer businesses can kind of build this as they go. But the underlying need of, where do I go first to launch this product, and how do I de-risk this product launch, and how do I show up in the right way in front of the customer, is consistent across all those segments.
Hmm. And talk to me about the incorporation and you have been through a lot, right? Starting a company during COVID is an insane piece, which I can
Yeah.
sympathize with you on that. But the one piece that's really interesting is we're also going through this AI tidal wave, of just new capabilities. And as a software company, we've seen companies just completely go away because AI can do what that software was specifically done to do. We've also seen software companies go to the next level who can properly incorporate AI into what they've already built. How big of a discussion point was this for you internally at AcuityMD, and what are you doing now to take this new shiny toy and incorporate it into what you were already doing?
Yeah, AI and this kind of recent, it's really only been the last 3 years. Um, it's the biggest technology shift of our generation. I don't think we'll see a bigger one. Um, and there's a lot to unpack with how it's affecting other software companies, and challenges and opportunities there. We stay focused on our customers, and I think, and even in deploying AI internally for our internal operations, um, there's a lot of work that goes from prototyping something and versus actually getting it integrated into the business processes that the company relies on. um, and our thesis since the beginning, and it goes back to kind of that data, that data mapping that I talked to earlier, about sort of combining first party and external data into a holistic platform. The reason we did all that is, and even before AI, we had this we had this theory that everything should be distilled down to a user's context and a company's context. So for example, Medtronic might have a business unit at Medtronic may have certain competitors in the market segments they play. And that's context, right? That's context about the market and the dynamics of the market, right? A sales rep who sells in that business unit, is constrained to a territory of accounts or geographies that they sell into. They have a certain quota they need to hit. They have a set of accounts that they are contracted to sell into versus greenfield accounts that they need to, go through VAC or activate. All of those are bits of context that are internal to the company that are relevant to help the rep sell and help the rep succeed. And then you layer on all the external context, who the competitors are, what procedures are going on in that account, what the referral networks look like, what products that account is using today, all this external bits of context, right? So each user can essentially project onto the same ontology of, the universe of medtech with their own context. It's specific to them and what they need to do to succeed for their own personal goals, but also for their organizational goals. So we've always been really focused on how do we assemble context for the user. So when they log in or use or, interact with an experience in AcuityMD's platform, it's personalized and it's hyper personalized to what they care about and what their company cares about. And so thinking about what that means in an AI age, we already had a lot of the ingredients to train the agent or to really harness the agent and the LLM around what each user and organization cares about. So as opposed to, you sort of open up ChatGPT or Claude for the first time, it doesn't really know a lot about you. And yeah, you can teach it skills and it'll learn memory over time. You can give it, integrations and connectors, but does it actually know who you are and what your goals are and what your organizational goals are and what the data that you care about is? It takes a lot of work to encode that into the LLM. And we have a shortcut because we've been investing in that, context layer since the start of the company, since before the AI age. It's just a matter of delivering that context to the LLM at the point in time. And so it all comes down to, understanding the context of the user and the goals that they're trying to achieve within the organization. That leads to a really rich AI experience so that you don't have to go and tell the LLM a million different things about you and what you care about to get value out of it.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, it almost feels, like I know a lot of these um, different like OpenAI and Gemini and Claude are now having on Gemini they're called gems, right? Where you can kind of build these specific profiles that you want to have that give some of those memory, because that's always the limitation with some of these. To your point, is they don't have memory. So that's super cool what you're doing there. Um, what did you do before the first startup? Like, what's your background? I'm curious on this.
Yeah. So, the other job I had, so I've worked at a few startups. I started my own company. I worked at a healthcare, data startup here in Boston,
Mhm.
and was the first sort of business hire there. Saw them raise, till Series B. That company was called Patient Ping. Now they're Bamboo Health, so they were acquired. So it really got to me how the company, how an enterprise software and data company was built in the healthcare space, sort of ground up. Awesome experience. Outside of that, I worked in management consulting. So I spent about 6 or 7 years at Bain and Company advising,
Yeah.
large biotech, biopharma, and medical device companies on commercial strategy and execution. So a lot of commercial work from that experience where I got to interact firsthand with larger companies and how they, would generate a strategy of like, hey, we want to focus on this segment of provider or on these new products that we're launching, and a lot of friction trying to actually operationalize that with the front line. Because the folks in home office or corporate would run all these analytics, they'd come out with a strategy and they'd try to push it out uh, to their team. And the best tools they had were really static spreadsheets or dashboards, which really you lose a lot of fidelity in the data, but you also lose the feedback loop back from the sales team about, hey, is this even the right thing to do? Like, are we noticing some new shift that we should capitalize on? So that experience really led led me to understand a lot of the problems in the bigger enterprise as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always curious about that, right? Because where I originally started with that was I kind of want to talk about fundraising and what you've learned through that process, because you've been very successful in the various fundraisers of AcuityMD. I know you mentioned the $80 million Series C, but it'd be good to layer in the previous rounds before that. But you very clearly had a good understanding of the market. You had a startup that had raised capital as well, right? That you mentioned had failed.
Our first startup, we couldn't even get
You couldn't even
capital.
raise capital for it. Okay. Nice. Yeah.
We spent we paid legal fees and patent filing fees out of our own pocket.
Yeah.
So that was
Yeah. Okay.
that was
Right on. So good. You've had a good lesson on a lot of things. Talk to me about, but raising this amount of capital has had to be a new experience for you. And so just walk me through those learning experiences of raising the seed round, raising the Series A, the B, the C, the different challenges that has kind of presented themselves at different levels, right? Because I think there's different stages. Like when you're raising seed stage capital, there might be a lot of different places you can get capital. It could be angel groups, it could be VCs, it could be family offices. But as you get further downstream, you definitely have more of a validated business model. But the people who can write checks into that company now become a lot different and kind of reduce. And so, walk me through some of these learning experiences. I think it's just fascinating to get, real world feedback from an entrepreneur that's going through it.
I think the biggest learning or lesson has been to align at every stage of the company's trajectory, to align the cap table around your long-term goals as a business and your long-term aspirations as a business. And I think having a cap table that's aligned to the maximum outcome, your mission, our mission at AcuityMD, has always been paramount. And that's caused us to slow down fundraising. That's caused us to defer fundraising. That's caused us to accelerate fundraising. That's really been the defining filter for us as a company, is to find people who are aligned with my vision as CEO and with our mission as a company. And I think and I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs, get a term sheet and think about it in terms of the numbers, the dilution, the amount, the valuation, board seat. And I think all of those are sort of secondary to, is this investor actually fundamentally aligned with what we're trying to do with the business long term? Are they going to try to push us into a new vertical? Are they going to try to pressure us to sell 5 years in? For us, starting the business, we wanted to build the biggest possible business in pursuit of our mission as possible, right? We wanted to stay independent as long as possible, to chart our own course. And we needed investors that believed in that, and also jived with that vision. And so I think that's the number one lesson learned, is to make sure your cap table is aligned with your long-term vision, and don't, and that is actually, even more important than the specific terms of each fundraise. Obviously the terms are important. I'm not trying to say that entrepreneurs should sell all of their business, if they find a like-minded investor. But when push comes to shove and, you're dealt with challenges or opportunities, it's much easier to have the flexibility and be on the same page with your investor group and your board. And I'll give a great example around our recent Series C, where, we didn't need the round. We were well capitalized, growing at a really fast clip, and, kind of in sort of post product market fit growth mode. And I kind of went around the horn with our investors and, say, hey, there's a huge AI opportunity for us. We have this data and ontology. LLMs are thirsty for that context. To your point earlier, they, the difference between a C+ answer and A- answer is unlocked by context that you feed the LLM at the right moment in the workflow or the right moment in the user experience. And data is a core foundation for that. And so we have this awesome AI opportunity in front of us. It's going to look very different than our core platform. There might not be features and buttons and, charts and, modular kind of packages. It might look like a very different type of business, credit-based, more fluid, just a different, and then we're going to have to build, a ton. We're going to have to invest a lot to see that end state out. But I think it's the right thing for the business because the world of opportunities has just opened up, and we can be the company that brings medtech into this LLM and AI age using our context layer. And I, basically circled the wagons. I was like, hey, this isn't going to be like a slam dunk. Like, it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be a long-term, execution path. It's going to take a lot of upfront investment. And we're going to say no to a lot of things that used to be on our roadmap that are no longer, they're incremental features. We want to go for the moonshots. And the resounding answer around the cap table is like, how much money do you need? Go, go, go. It wasn't, well, you have a great business, let's look to sell in the next couple of years because we need returns and yada, yada, yada. It was long-term thinking. And I think, had we aligned ourselves with different investors earlier on, we would have been, more challenged to recognize that opportunity and capitalize on it. And I think every, sort of company that was founded before 2023 is sort of dealing with this, how hard do I lean into AI question? And the ones that are able to, fully commit, I think are the ones that are going to be successful. And the ones who have cap tables and boards that enable them and, allow them to fully commit are the ones that I think will be set up in the long term to succeed.
Yeah, makes total sense. I love the tie there, where you kind of pull that together with your Series C. Is this current cap table re-upping investment? Was this a new investor that was brought into the fold? I see how you navigated your current cap table, but how did you navigate a potential new person coming in and what that looked like and how that changed dynamic and focus and culture on the board?
Yeah. So Stepstone and Atreides were the two largest investors in this round. Both were on our cap table already. Sort of both investor groups, essentially, doubled and tripled down their position with us. All existing investors invested in the round. We did bring on some new money as well. I think it's always important and healthy to bring on new investors with every round of capital, bring new, perspectives to the table, new relationships, new advice for me as a CEO as well. But for this round, it was investors who had smaller positions in the company, wanting us to go further and faster.
Yeah, Mike, as you've grown, you grow organically. You've also grown by taking in more capital. How do you manage culture within the company and the team? Because so from the outside world, right? Raising a Series C is very exciting. Wow, AcuityMD just raised $80 million. That's awesome. They're bringing in some new capital. They're going to grow faster. They're going to work on something else faster, right? There's a lot of assumptions that can be made. There's also assumptions from your internal team, which sometimes positive and sometimes uncertainty. Hey, what's going on with this new capital? What's going to change about this? As a CEO, you want to keep that team rowing in the same direction. Kind of walk me through some of those things you've dealt with just from an organic growth perspective, but also with bringing in that much capital.
Yeah, I think independent of the capital raise, our philosophy to to raising any round of capital, I probably should have, led with this, in addition to finding investors who are aligned with your long term, has always been to never build a business model around subsequent rounds of capital, right? So for every round of capital that we raise, our base case plan is for it to be our last round of capital. And, if we recognize the market opportunity or have, additional investments in product or commercial that can accelerate us, and obviously our metrics are still, good, then we'll go out and raise, right? We'll capitalize on it. So never raise money when you need it. Raise it when, it unlocks something bigger. When never raise capital when you need it for your core business. Raise when it unlocks something much bigger, or the flexibility to do something much bigger. So that's how I've always run the business. And I think, from an employee standpoint, obviously I can't speak to every employee, but we've taken a pretty disciplined approach to how we allocate that capital. Where, we it gives us opportunity to make bets and to try things out that may totally fail. I think that mentality is something our team has largely embraced, and is really important in today's age where, the AI world is moving so quickly. A lot of our software is, AI generated and approved by humans, obviously with humans in the loop. But you can just build things so much faster. And so the bottleneck is no longer, the product specs and the engineering time. It's more, is this the right business problem to focus on? And what do our customers say? And how does it solve customer problems? And so having many more experiments to run and, being judicious about what you kill versus what you give oxygen to is something I think our team has done a really good job embracing. So that's one thing. The other piece is, I think, having a mission, and, for folks that are, that are in med tech, I think they sort of intuit this because they're in the industry. But for software businesses and AI businesses, I think the whole premise of a mission is kind of like, it's kind of, I don't know. I don't want to say the word BS, but it's just different. For us, our mission is so core to what we're doing that it inspires a lot of sort of collective energy towards that goal that allows for us to be aligned and in sync and think about the big picture. And so I think the mission is something that's really helped sort of quiet the noise around any capital raise, because our mission hasn't changed, right? It's the same mission we've been marching on. Now we just have more firepower and can experiment more aggressively and can try different things out and build for the long term, as opposed to, getting excited by shiny pennies.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's really helpful. I think one of the other questions I want to ask you, and this is, what I find this super interesting. You're probably over it at this point, but I met you first. And we were talking at an early stage at Project Medtech of like, hey, can we use AcuityMD's platform for our companies to kind of talk about, hey, they have some commercialization opportunities as they grow here. It'd be good to have access to some of that data, that sort of thing. Ultimately, we decided that, hey, we want the startups to get their own AcuityMD license. And so they did, and we've gotten to see some of that system from there. But regardless, it's not where I'm going with this. You come from a medtech family, which is really cool to me. But like I said, I met you first, and then I happened to be at LSI one year. I meet this guy. He's got the same last name as you. I'm like, Mike? He goes, that's my son. I'm like, oh, very cool. The next day, I sat down next to him at the bar, and he's having a drink with his wife. And I'm like, hey, I'm Dwayne. She goes, oh, I work for Boston Scientific. I'm like, oh, very cool. She's like, oh, I'm his husband, I'm his wife. And I was like, wait a minute. So this is just like a big med tech family going on here. And then I thought to myself, how cool dinner conversations may or may not be, or you get sick of. But yeah, talk to me a little bit about what it's like having parents in the med tech field. And was that helpful growing up? Did it sway you in any way to get into this industry? Because some people are like, I'm out. I don't want to do, I don't want to be in med tech. And others are like, this is pretty cool. I got to watch my mom and dad be in med tech growing up. So it definitely influenced me. So I'm curious from your perspective, what that's like.
You haven't mentioned my brother yet. My younger brother, whose Twitter handle is literally at the MedTech guy. So he got that Twitter name,
I did not know
early
that.
on.
Yeah.
I think he's had it for like 10 years. And now an orthopedic surgeon. He's a resident right now, but worked in MedTech for a long time as an
Wow.
engineer, and
Super
then
cool.
transitioned into medicine. Yeah, I mean, dinner tables were so my dad and brother both have engineering minds and engineering
Okay.
background. They would constantly, we have like way too many 3D printers than any family should own. Um, and they'd constantly be like prototyping and napkin sketching and,
Okay.
talking about different parts of the anatomy and how to treat, different conditions. And so they were very much on the engineering side. And, so it was awesome to grow up around that. And, obviously got exposure into the bigger kind of business problems, and, legal and regulatory and, you know, um, quality, world through my mom as well. So uh, definitely a topic of many, dinner table conversations. I think it's an industry. For me, I didn't study medicine in college. I, studied, finance and public policy. I've always been drawn to industries that are heavily regulated. And I think med tech is an awesome industry because it touches the patient. There's high powered technology at play to benefit the patient. And the story of med tech, in kind of big arcs, is really the story of the evolution of the practice of medicine, right? Like medicine is like advancements in medicine are bottlenecked by the technology that surgeons and clinicians can use to treat diseases and treat and care for patients. And so I think that interaction around, it's a technology industry that partners so closely with medicine to advance how patients can be treated through better and better technologies. And I think that interplay is fascinating, right? If you think about, kind of the evolution of, laparoscopes and robots, and now, we're talking about autonomous robots, right? It's just like fascinating to see how technology is evolving as the practice of medicine is evolving. It's kind of the symbiotic and very messy at times world, right? And I think for me as an entrepreneur, my biggest fear and my biggest concern as a patient of the healthcare space and someone who has family members who are patient, everyone's a patient, right? Is that it's becoming harder to innovate and it's becoming harder to commercialize. And the industry is chronically underserved by, vendors, that focus on entire, they treat pharma the same as med tech, the same as, other B2B businesses, the same as distribution businesses. And so it's an industry that's chronically underserved from like the bigger service providers. But at the same time, it's becoming harder and harder to, innovate and sell, and more competitive and more red tape and harder to break through the noise. And that to me is like, I don't want to, like, not even a blinking red light, like the house is on fire. Like if, think about, like all these big advancements from open to laparoscopic to robotic, like, and seriously question if that happened today, like would people have actually been able to make the leap, or was it something about the environment back then that made it easier? And obviously it didn't happen overnight, and nothing in medicine does. But I just think, the practice of medicine and technology kind of evolved symbiotically towards progress. And it's just becoming harder to make progress because it's becoming more expensive to commercialize, it's becoming more expensive to, go through the regulatory process. Um, and that I think is a big issue that needs to be solved. And, with AcuityMD, our mission is to accelerate adoption of medical technology, and we're starting in commercial, but hope to play a role in solving that problem enduringly for the long term by taking a very focused approach on the industry.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Awesome. Final two questions. First one is, if there was a company that is international to the U.S. Looking to they've commercialized in their local market wherever they are, or a different market, they're looking to come to the U.S. What's the first piece of information or advice you would give them about commercializing here in the U.S.?
Oh, that's a good question. So this is like an internet. They're already commercial internationally.
Yep.
They're FDA approved to come to the US, and they're trying to figure out how to commercialize. I think it really depends on the dynamics of the company. Do they have direct sales reps? Do they have a distributor sales force? I think my general perspective is for smaller companies that are, that have an innovative technology, that they're trying to like, kind of, get the embers going of a commercial engine. There is no replacing having, someone full-time focused on commercialization.
Totally.
And, even for our own business, like the idea of, having a reseller. I remember one of our first, we were interviewing for sales leaders very early on in the company's history. And one of the candidates that we were interviewing, awesome credentials, like had worked at some great company, really awesome individual. But one thing he said, kind of really bothered me, which is like, you should engage your resellers like very early. I was like, dude, we're a 20-person company with like a rapidly evolving product that we like are thirsty for that frontline feedback so that we can make the product better. And so that we can build those relationships. And, what are we talking about resellers? Like we got to like figure out our go-to-market motion before we can, scale it to third parties. And I think there are elements of that as well in med tech. And I'm not saying that every company needs to hold themselves to this rule, but I don't think there's any beating the learnings from having someone on the ground trying to sell your product and then feeding those learnings back to R&D and back to marketing and back to the rest of the organization. So that would be my number one piece, is to find someone full-time that is, core goal is to break ground in the US and commercially. Now you got to enable that person. They have to be successful. You have to hire the right person. You have to give them the right resources to succeed, ideally, with insights and information that they can use to kind of tailor your product and technology to the needs of the ideal customer profile. But I don't think anything beats having someone on the ground, because you learn so much from that frontline experience that's useful to grow and scale. And then you can, go nuts with hiring reps and 1099s and, distributors, but nothing beats that initial learning that you get from interacting with the market and feeding that back to other parts of the organization.
I totally agree with you. We hear so many, even companies in the US who aren't commercialized yet, saying, I have a big distribution agreement coming up, and that's how I'm going to, grab market share. And it's like, you haven't sold anything yet. You need to go out, sell, and live at that place until you can figure out, well, does the nurse grab for this product when it's on the shelf? Why don't they? There is so much to learn from there. And I think if it's a person who is full-time on your team, it's the only way to do that initial step. So I love that kind of feedback. And I think that's really good tactical feedback. I ask this question of a lot of people on the podcast. And a lot of times, people will kind of go to like how the US market is maybe different than a single payer healthcare system in Europe or something like this, and how that affects certain things at a large scale. But I love the tactical advice like that, right? I think it's just it's a big deal that people oftentimes overlook, as if it's like the product's just going to sell itself. Second question is, do you have a book or two, nonfiction, fiction, whatever you want to give, that you would recommend to a listener listening in the podcast? And I say nonfiction or fiction because we've had a few folks now give some fictional books that are really good from a lessons perspective. And I think the tendency though is for most people to give, a nonfiction book. But I'd be curious if there's a book that you read that you thought, wow, this was so helpful in my personal development, business development, whatever it is.
Oh boy, putting me on the spot on, my reading style is typically to, um, I don't love reading business books or, like kind of self-help type books. It just
Yeah.
like a lot when you're already just in it every day. Like I definitely enjoy, you
Yeah.
know, escapism with my reading, like
Yeah.
Stephen King, it's like some
Yeah.
stuff that's out there. I will say like I have it on my desk. It's literally on my desk every day. Biodesign, textbook by, Josh McHauer and and
Hmm.
and team. Like that book is incredible.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
it literally walks you through every step of the process, commercialize or innovating in
Yeah.
med tech. And I
Yep.
think there's so much domain knowledge that seems inaccessible, even for someone who grew up around the industry, seems
Hmm.
inaccessible about, how do I take this idea and bring it to market? Or how do I even know if it's a good idea? Or what are all the steps I need to go through and milestones that I need to prove? Like there's just so much context that you need to be an innovator in med tech. And, I really appreciate folks who democratize that and make it accessible to the masses through education, through knowledge sharing. Um, so that's a book. I'm trying to think of any other ones recently that I've kind of flipped through. That's about
Yeah.
that's what I'll go
I
with.
like that. I like that one. Are you,
I
you
just finished Gentleman in Moscow. That was a great book.
okay?
Very different. I don't think it taught me anything about
Yeah.
entrepreneurship or leadership, but it was just
Good book.
I always enjoy the historical fictions that take you back into an age that,
Yeah.
we forget about.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned Stephen King. Are you a horror film type of guy, scary movie type of guy, or just enjoy Stephen King books?
I do both. I do enjoy horror movies.
Nice.
My favorite genre for sure.
Yeah.
I haven't caught up on the latest ones with, a 3-year-old at home and, obviously a lot of stuff going on, but
Yep.
definitely I've heard really good things about a new one that just came out. I think like Obsession it's called.
Okay.
It's like the classic already.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
at some point I want to watch that.
Yeah. My horror film watching has gone down significantly. We have a 5 and a 3-year old, but it was so funny. I was talking to someone the other day because I think I saw the scary movie comedies. They just released another one of these, and when the first time I watched one of the scary movies, I thought, I was like, this has ruined some of my favorite horror films for me because it made light of some of the scenes within there. But nonetheless, I see advertisements for them, but I haven't caught up on a lot of them either. Mike, thank you so much for doing this. We're going to include a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. We're going to include a link to AcuityMD's website in the show notes as well. So depending on what platform they're listening to, up or down an inch, you'll see that there. We'll also have some of the recent press releases from AcuityMD regarding the Series C. So thanks for joining me today, and thanks for sharing some of your journey, your knowledge, what you've learned. It's going to be super valuable for folks listening in, and also just talking about commercialization and the difficulties of it, and how you're trying to make that a little bit easier for companies to strategize around.
Thanks, Wayne. It was great chatting with you. Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks for all your support along the way.
Awesome.
Keep up the great work with the podcast. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Freddie Coffey, Director of Marketing at Jumpstart. The Project Medtech podcast is proudly sponsored by Jumpstart Inc. Jumpstart's Trailblazer Accelerator helps Ohio's most innovative early-stage health tech startups fast-track their growth with tailored advising from serial entrepreneurs, non-dilutive funding to fuel their journey, and unrivaled access to a network of experts, resources, and investment opportunities. Whether it's improving patient outcomes, advancing digital health, or reimagining care delivery, Jumpstart provides the high-impact services and critical resources to bring big ideas to life. Learn more at jumpstartinc.org/startups.
Thank you for listening. At our core, we at Project Medtech are networkers, educators, and consultants. We meet you where you are to bring value and to create impact. We care deeply about helping medtech companies succeed right from the start, through to exit by providing consulting and fractional services, hosting impactful industry events, and of course, sharing incredible guest insights like the ones you heard today through our podcast. Please reach out at any time if we can be of assistance. Check out our website at www.projectmedtech.com or email us at info@projectmedtech.com.